recently in Toronto, there's a new institution that is being started, and the name of the institution is the Canadian Yeshiva and Rabbinical School. And before you get to any conclusions of what it is, it basically was started by, I would say, some right-wing conservative rabbis, and in a certain way, right-wing conservative Judaism in Toronto is perhaps the most right-wing element in the conservative movement. Toronto's conservative Judaism is like the old-time conservative Judaism in many, many ways, where they're not as liberal, as much to the left as American conservative Judaism is. And the rabbis who are involved follow a certain halachic lifestyle in line with conservative Judaism. But conservative Judaism did have a standard that was connected somewhat to halacha. They called it halacha. It was their determination of the halacha. So you'd find conservative rabbis keeping kosher, although perhaps in different ways than Orthodox individuals. They had different perceptions and so forth. But the reason I'm anyways, the Toronto conservative rabbis are pretty much on the right wing of the conservative rabbinate, and therefore they have some issues with JTS, with the Jewish Theological Seminary, and so forth, with the movement of the conservative, with the direction of the conservative movement in the States, and so forth. Anyways, they have this idea of starting what they call the Canadian Yeshiva and Rabbinical Seminary, and it's somehow connected to U of T, and all these other things are involved, and so forth and so forth. Anyways, what happened was that there was an article about this new institution in the National Post here in Canada. The National Post is basically a national Canadian newspaper, and there was an article. Actually, it was owned by a Jewish family. I don't know if it's still owned by a Jewish family, but basically the National Post is considered to be more Jewishly conscious, whatever. Anyways, it came out. They had an article on this new institution, and someone showed me the article. There's a very interesting statement in it, and to me, it's a statement that is very bothersome. The dean of this institution, the person behind this institution, basically, when asked where he stood in terms of Judaism, denomination, and so forth, he said that basically he is pre-denominational. It seems to be the term that supposedly he used, but what he talked about in terms of this article is that he was going back to classical Judaism. What's classical Judaism? The Judaism of the 1700s. Before there were denominations, before there were rifts, before there were issues and so forth. Back to the 1700s, there was one Judaism, and there was no issues in this classical Judaism. And as a Jew was a Jew. It wasn't based upon any issues. It was a Jew was a Jew. And he called this classical Judaism. And I found this very, very troubling. I found it troubling. I don't know how successful this place will be. I don't know what will transpire. But the fact is if you look at it and you read it in the paper, it comes across like he is the one who is pro-shalom. He's the one who wants to promote unity and caring among all Jews and so forth and so forth. And basically he's just saying, let's go back to pre-denominations, to classical Judaism, and where we didn't ask what denomination you were, we all were just Jews. Sounds beautiful. Sounds so beautiful, and all Jews, and so many Jews love this, and oh yeah, I just love Jews, and we're just Jews, I'm not this, I'm just a Jew. The problem is that that approach is basically dishonest. I'm not saying intentionally dishonest, but there's a dishonesty to that approach because it ignores the reality and it ignores a significant aspect of Judaism, and that is the underlying assumptions that you have about Jewish behavior, about Jewish life. In other words, the denominational splits among Jews basically should be, I don't know if people understand that they are or whether what they should be, is statements about the distinctions in theology amongst Jews. And if you're talking about a theological system, then those distinctions are very important. The reason that in the 1700s, or prior to the 1700s, the reason you had Jews basically being pre-denominational, non-denominational, or whatever, is because there was no issue on some basic fundamental tenets of the religion. When Spinoza no longer wanted to abide by certain halachic standards, the community threw him out. He had to leave. He was no longer recognized as a member of the Jewish community. The fact is that there is a reality of a theological homogeneity that allows for a group to interconnect. Yeah, were there differences? Yes. Misagdim and Hasidim, Sephardim and Ashkenazim, but those differences were all encompassed within a certain level of theological homogeneity. The Karaites weren't part of that group. The Karaites formed their own community. The fact is that it's because they were theologically at odds. And this is something that so many people don't recognize. And it's such a simple thing to say, let's all be Jews. But the point is, if you want to all be Jews, and you're talking about something which has no theological consequence, such as you all want to be Jews, therefore we should help each other out. We should give tzedakah to all Jews. We should care about anti-Semitism, which attacks all Jews, and so forth. Then of course there's interrelationship. We are just one Jew. I'm a Jew, you're a Jew, and so forth. But if you're talking about theological issues, where it's a simple thing like, hey, I think this is kosher, you think that's kosher, you don't think kosher matters, or other theological distinctions, well, that is something that is a distinction that makes a difference. Now, I'll give you an example of how this applies. I have a brother-in-law who runs an organization called Vahavta, which is a very interesting organization, in many ways a very positive organization. It is basically a Canadian Jewish humanitarian organization. They do a lot of things outside into the Jewish world, into the non-Jewish world. So they help out in Guyana, and they help out in Zimbabwe, and so forth and so forth. And they help out in the streets of Toronto in terms of the homeless. And in many ways, what they do is a real Kiddush Hashem. It's really good. But it's in a certain level non-denominational, because it's basically, it has Orthodox, conservative Reform Jews, a lot of Reform Jews involved. The fact is that, hey, we can all agree upon helping out this way as well. Of course, Reform Jews actually stress it much more because that's much more a part of their faith, to be honest. Anyways, my brother-in-law he told me he has a Christian and a Muslim, what's the word he calls them? what do you call it? Some organization puts them in there. Not a student, something similar. Like sort of like an individual from that sort of is placed into an organization. So he has a Christian and a Muslim individual in his office who's been placed in there by other organizations to sort of work with Bahafta and so forth. And there was a discussion he had in his office about some aspect of the Torah, and he wanted to hear the Christian perspective. I think it might have been the Akedah. Muslims hold it wasn't Yitzchak who was the Akedah, it was Yishmael, and so forth and so forth. And what happened is he said it was a very interesting conversation because they had a Jewish person who a Jewish educator, a person who used to be in Jewish education who now works for Hafta, and they had this Muslim and they had this Christian. He said a very interesting discussion, over how to study the text. Okay, and he wanted to reproduce it. He was going to invite a bunch of people over to have a discussion on some other aspect of Chumash, and he was going to have conservative, reform, Orthodox, non-Jewish, and so forth, Christians, so forth, all to get together and discuss a text in the Chumash. Okay, welcome aboard, Alex. Anyways, so he was going to have this evening and so forth, so forth. So he invited me, and I told him I would not participate. And why? Why? And I said to him, listen, if you are having a class on literature, right? Shakespeare, okay? You want to study the text of Shakespeare, and you want to hear what everyone thinks about the text of Shakespeare from different perspectives and so on and so forth. If I was interested in Shakespeare, I would go to that. But that's not what Chumash is about. Right? It is not a text that we all study and just happen to get different perceptions in it. How we look at the text is so different. It's so fundamentally different. And I gave an example. For example, when I look at the Chumash text, the text to me is a code for something that's beyond the text. I quoted to him the famous words of Rosh Shimshon Hirsch in Mishpatim, the way he understands the Chumash text, and it's not the way a lot of people understand it. A lot of people try and say that that the Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral law, is a commentary on the written law. Rosh Shimshon Hirsch completely presents it differently. He said, what do you think happened on Har Sinai? Because Baruch Hu, God, gave a lecture. He spoke orally to Moshe Rabbeinu. And then he told Moshe Rabbeinu, write down these notes. So really, what's the Torah? The Torah is the synopsis, the crib notes on the lecture. Now think about this way, if you're ever in university, about how you wrote down notes of a lecture. You didn't write down notes of the lecture word for word. Sometimes you threw in another word. Sometimes you threw this. Sometimes you had your own code in how you wrote the lecture down. And from one word it would set you off to think about 65 different things in the lecture. Let's say you were talking about cars, and the lecturer started getting into the problems of cars. You'd sit there and say word lemon. And it would mean cars that don't work and all these other things that the lecturer is saying. Some other guy comes by and reads your notes, takes it as the text, comes back and says, you discussed lemons in your class today. No, I used the word lemon because it meant this and this and this. So different when you understand that the starting point is an oral lecture, that the words were written down with the projection of trying to move on. By the way, Alex is asking a question. Was Hirsch's conception unique among Jewish theologians? Were there others in the Orthodox world who disagreed? I don't think he was that unique. I think that the understanding of the text is that the text is obviously subject to Torah Sheba'al Peh. The text is subject to the oral law. So the fact is that within Orthodoxy, it doesn't start with the text. Now, there are other positions that say the text has to mean something. And that's why you get into so many different understandings of the text, in the sense that the text could have 70 different understandings and so forth and so forth. One might be more literal, less literal, but the point is that everyone agrees the text is subject to the understanding of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the text was written with, in other words, if you look at a historical concept, let's say in an upcoming parsha, when it says that Esav tries to kiss Yaakov, okay, and the text says Esav, kissed Yaakov, and there's dots on it, and Rashi points out that really Esav tried to bite him, and that Yaakov's neck turned to stone, right? Okay. So he asked me what really happened. Historically, what really happened? The text says this, the Medrash says this. What really happened? And the point is what really happened is secondary. Because the truth is that all the different things, obviously, if you have six different ways of understanding what happened when Yaakov met Esav, obviously, historically, something must have happened. But the reality is what the Torah is telling you is the world beyond the historical event in its narrow sense. What were Esav's emotions when he met Yaakov? And they were complex, and they were contradictory. This was his brother, but he had a lot of animosity towards his brother. So that certain ways, what the Torah is saying is, through these different viewpoints, is that these were all different. This is reflective of all the different issues. And that's what the Torah is really trying to get across. So the historical event itself, or what the text says, is secondary to the whole concept of the oral law. And the text, in certain ways, is crib notes for the oral law. Text is not to be read by itself. So what I said to my brother-in-law is that's true. You have to understand that I cannot sit down and discuss a parsha with a Christian. I cannot sit down and discuss Bereshis with a Christian. Why? Because the fact is that he sees the text. I don't see the text. I see what's beyond the text. And even the text I see as something that is a code for something that is broader than the text. So, to me, it's a completely different work. That's theology. The fact is I don't have to argue this out anyway. If I'm going to have theological debates, who's right, who's wrong, I'm not into the theological debates. I have my reasons why I think Torah is emes. I think they're pretty solid reasons. But the point is, when I say Torah is emes, when I say the Torah is true, what I'm saying is my understanding of the text is true. My understanding of the nature of the text is true, with the recognition that that's how you have so many different commentaries. So if you think about that, you understand that listen, if a person approaches the Chumash as a book of literature, says this is a wonderful book of literature, maybe there might be some value in seeing some of the benefits of how simplistic literature approach to the text may uncover some insights. Like, for example, and take something in Tehillim. Okay, Tehillim is written as poetry. Okay, I know nothing about poetry. Maybe a person who's a poet, who understands the idea of rhythm and poetry from books of literature, maybe that person come up with some insights that would add to the tremendous, depth of the Tanakh ideas, of specifically Psalms and so forth. Okay, but the truth is that maybe I'd like to hear what a person who's involved in literature has to say about the text, because I can incorporate that in my understanding of what the text really is. The text is broader because Baruch Hu gave it over in a certain language, but it also is a code. But it also is the text in the most simplistic way. Okay, as it says, the fact is that there has to be the pashut, the straightforward understanding of the text as well within certain parameters. So the point is I have no problems with saying, hey, I'd like to hear what you have to say. Listen, I'm not here. Would you have to stay like from a Christological perspective? I remember once, it was interesting. I was in the Jewish Public Library here in Toronto, and I took out a book from for a kid's book for my kids. I saw that they had kids books, Jewish kids books. And I took it out. Took one for a kid, Daniel and the Lion's Den. That sounds like a good book. I'll take it on with. So I'm looking through this book with one of my kids, and so forth and so forth. Then I come to the place where the angel appears to Daniel, and lo and behold, the angel is Jesus. So I said, what's going on over here? Like, look at what's going on over here. Then what I figured out was, in Christian thought, that text. And by the way, Christians is not so fundamentalist either. They already have a shot, a reading of the text also to support their Christological perception. So look at this. They said the angel means Jesus. Okay, fine. So I closed the book. Okay, and what I did is I took it back to the library and I said to the library, hey, listen, you should look at this book. It's not their fault. They thought it was a Jewish book. Okay, so they thought it was a Jewish book, so they took it off the shelf. But the point is that I have to sit with. I'm going to sit in a discussion on a verse in Tanakh with someone who has assumptions that I totally am not interested in. I'm not even talking about rejecting. I'm really not interested in. No. But if you tell me someone who's like into just literature and can tell me something about just the text from literature, I might be interested. But not in terms of debating the meaning of the text. The text has many different meanings. I like to hear what you have to say. Okay, fine. Give me a literature perspective. How does it fit into Torah? It's a possibility within Torah because Torah is multidimensional. But obviously, it fits in because the code behind Torah allows for that type of breadth. So it's a very different perspective, and that's all theology. That's all theology. So the truth is that I'm bothered by this attempt to not understand the theological distinctions, because what you do is you get down to a common denominator. If you don't have the theological distinctions of let's say Orthodox Judaism in the text, there's a lot of things in the text you cannot prove from the text. Person comes up to you and asks you a question. Where is that in the Chumash? Where is this law in the Chumash? Where is that law in the Chumash? It's not. It's not. But more significantly, right, there are statements in the Chumash that you could, the person looks at and says, hey, this seems to be contrary to what you're thinking. Okay, fine. I understand the text subject to certain parameters from Torah Shebaal Peh. So even if the text says something which on the surface seems to contradict those parameters, let it. That was one of the big issues between the Tzaddukim, the Prusim, the Karaites, and the Rabbinites. Their real issue was not. A lot of people make this mistake. The Karaites also had an oral tradition. That was not the issue for the Karaites. It wasn't that they didn't have an oral tradition. The Karaites didn't like it that the oral tradition trumped the text. In other words, when they looked at it and said, like for example, classic idea, it says, on Shabbat you're not supposed to have fire burning in your house on Shabbat. That's what the text says, right? Fire should not burn in your house on Shabbat. That's what the text says. Kara says this is what the text says. Comes around Chazal and says, it doesn't mean l'tavar, it doesn't mean don't have fire burning, it means don't light a fire. That's not the words that he used, that's not the text language. It means don't light a fire. That's Chazal telling you this is what we want those words to mean. But if you look at the words, that's not what the words say. So the Karaite said, listen, I'm going to accept an oral tradition. Yeah, tefillin, okay, it could be like this. They weren't upset about, but if there was an absence of explanation in the text and it had to be filled out pre-Eitz Hadar by an esrog, okay, a beautiful fruit. Okay, it's the esrog. That wasn't the problem. People would say, well, how did Karaites know it was an esrog? Through an oral tradition. They had no problems with that because it wasn't contradicted by the text. Text said a beautiful fruit. Okay, an esrog can be a beautiful fruit. What was the problem for the Karaites? when the text contradicted what was the oral tradition. It says don't have a fire. It says don't leave your house on Shabbat. It says don't have fire burning in your house on Shabbat. Okay? Rabbis come around and say, no, it doesn't mean don't leave your house on Shabbat. It means don't leave your city on Shabbat. Or other people say don't carry out of your house on Shabbat. Question of how to understand it. They look and say, that's not what the words say. The words say A. You're saying the words say B, but the words say A. And the theory of Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, of not being a Karaite is, you know something? It doesn't matter what the words say. That's not what's primary. It's because it's the rabbinic understanding of what the words say that is primary, because the words themselves are only codes for the oral lecture of God to Moshe. Or more significantly, the Torah text is a code system to explain something beyond the text. So therefore, if I'm going to sit down and discuss Torah, I may want to hear what a person literature has to say about the text. I'm not going to get upset by that. But the fact is for me to get into it, oh, that's not what the text means. What are you talking about? You read the text as a book of literature, that's what it says. Right? I'm going to argue with you about what the text says. Okay, according to a book of literature, this is what it says. So if you're reading the text as a book of literature and you say, hey, it says don't leave your house on Shabbat, I'll have to turn around and say, okay, you're right. That's what the text says. And if I was reading it as a book of literature, that's the way I'd have to read it. But I don't read it as a book of literature. And therefore, I'm not interested in being in debate among people. I see a program every once in a while. 3 rabbis discussing Torah, Orthodox, conservative, reform. To me, I think that's ridiculous. Why? Because the a priorities, the underlying assumptions of the 3 individuals in approaching that text are totally different. It's like saying three guys are getting together. One is going to discuss War and Peace. One is going to discuss Freud's, Moses and monotheism. One's going to discuss Darwin's Origin of Species. Well, they're all discussing different things. Why do you put them together? That's the way I look. Right. That's the way I look at this text. You're going to look at the text as a book of literature. I'm looking at the text as a document of revelation describing revelation, which is a broader aspect beyond the document. So how you look at the text, maybe within my understanding of Revelation, you have a voice in it, but it's not that I want to argue that that's the primary voice, because you will not buy my understanding. And the truth is, you see this even more so. Like, for example, one thing that always gets me is, you see they have in Reformed Hebrew schools, they have this thing, let's write a medrash. The kids all get together and make up your own medrash. And it drives me crazy. Because the medrash is not just some cute stories that were sort of created to expand the biblical story. Midrashim are very deep concepts representing ideas that express something from a different perspective, but within a realm of emes. This is a very different perspective. Just take a little drink if you guys don't mind. I don't get product placement for that. I just want to point out with that. Okay. So the fact is that's very significant. So going back to the original topic, I really don't like it. This idea, we're all Jews. No denominations. I'm beyond denominational. I'm non-denominational. I find denominations create friction among Jews. I'm against denominations, or this new line in town, pre-denominational, going back to classic Judaism. Classic Judaism, 1700s, 1600s, because there was a shared theology. Now we don't have a shared theology. Therefore, to ignore the theological distinctions is basically trying to maintain a falsehood. Now, having said all this, watch how we're doing it. Because this is really significant. Because I find that every group in Judaism doesn't want to accept the denominations. Right? People to the left are saying, no, I don't want denominations. We're all Jews. People to the right, they don't want to accept the denominations either. And it bothers me in both ideas. When a Reform person says, I don't want to accept denominations, what are they really trying to say? They're really trying to say, I want Orthodox people to accept me as an equal within their Jewish theology. And they love throwing out the word Elu ve'elu. Elu ve'elu, right? Like Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai both accepted each other's opinion. Reform Jews like to say Elu ve'elu, the Orthodox should accept the Reform. It's not true. Elu ve'elu meant Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai both accepted each other. But Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai were Perushim. They were Pharisees. And they did not accept Tzaddukim. They did not accept the Sadducees. Elu ve'elu did not apply to the Sadducees. Elu ve'elu did not apply to the Karaites. Elu ve'elu applied within certain standards of theology. There was room for machlokesim, for disagreement. But there was a point where you're not part of Elu ve'elu. But the Reform loved to say, we're all one Jews, because they want to say we're all, and it's all Elu ve'elu, and therefore no denomination. This seems to be the constant mantra to try and say, hey, we're all one people and unity and bring us all together, and we shouldn't have denominational distinctions on that one side. But then you have it from the Frum as well, and this is something that bothers me tremendously. If you go up to the Frum, they don't want to say, a lot of Orthodox people don't want to say, that's Reform Judaism. Okay, they don't want to call it Reform Judaism. They just say there's one Judaism. And the thing is, you find this in the way everyone does it. The Reform like to give introduction to Judaism. We're all generic Judaism. But the Orthodox also like to do that. Introduction to Judaism. We're all Jews. And there's only one Judaism. Of course, it's Orthodox Judaism. But the fact is, in this mantra of saying there's only one Judaism, people aren't here when they're hearing Orthodox Judaism is the only Judaism. There's some hearing it that way, but what they're also hearing is that the only reason that these people are against the others is because of some political reason. In other words, I think it's extremely important that Orthodox Jews start saying, I believe in Orthodox Judaism, and recognize that there's another religion called Reform Judaism, another theology, and we don't share the same theology. And that's their theology with their theologians, and they happen to use the word title for their clergy. Fine, but it's not my religion. I have a different theology. We're both Jews, we're both collected people, there's ways we can connect for the furtherance of the Jewish people and so forth. The reason I think that's significant is because you get the people thinking and recognizing that there are, you get the people thinking, what do they really believe in? Now, Babushka writes in here, then won't people argue over who has the real and only Judaism? Yes. People will have an argument like that. But then when people argue, you have legitimacy and you have strength in that arguing. What are people doing right now? They're basically walking around with some hazy view of Judaism, right, that is unclarified, and they sort of ignore it. I don't have people arguing about what really is right. Let's not say who has the real and only Judaism. What really is right? Did Torah happen on Sinai or not? I disagree with Reform Rabbi. Reform Rabbi says there was no Torah in Sinai. I say there's a Torah in Sinai. That's a disagreement. And there's consequences of that disagreement. There are consequences in behavior, there are consequences in ethics. Right? I hold certain things not to be permitted, he holds certain things to be permitted. I may hold certain things to be okay, he may hold certain things not to be okay. The truth is we have two different systems. So if you want to argue, at least if you're going to argue about it, at least you have some legitimacy in arguing about it. when you have this sort of like haziness, there's no argument. Everyone's okay. We're all accepting as Jews. So what happens is you can do whatever you want and not accept you as a Jew. I think there's a value in argument. Now, there's respectful argument, and there's a recognition that, and I have to be a believer of this, is that don't be judgmental in terms of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I would not say to someone, you're going to hell because that. Who am I to say that someone's going to hell or not? That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's. This is not mine. I won't say also who goes to heaven. I mean, the fact is that I don't know. I don't know who's a Tinnik Nishma. I don't know this. I don't know that. But I can sit there and say, listen, I disagree with you. And saying I disagree with you, I'm saying that I think it's this and you think it's that. Now, there's certain disagreements that both are acceptable within the pale. Right? They both have a certain standing. There's others that aren't. Okay, so Bushka now, isn't it better to have Jews still with some attachment to Judaism, even if it's a hazy manner, than to push people away completely because they can't agree with a particular interpretation? So Bushka is asking a very, very legitimate question. And I think it's exactly the opposite. I think the reason you have more people becoming disinterested in Judaism is because there's nothing for them to attach onto. See, the fact is that Judaism has been prepared. Especially if you speak to people who went to Hebrew school, Judaism was perceived as having so little depth that everyone basically didn't want to have an argument. So what did you stand for? You didn't stand for anything. What's the Jewish view of this? I don't know. Why? Because the Reform guy says that, and the Orthodox say that, so I don't want to get into an argument, so we'll just sit there and say parv. Peace, order, and good government, or motherhood and apple pie. So a guy who says, what does this Judaism believe in? Maybe you can, now the truth is, if you bring out arguments, it's true, a person who's hazy and therefore may be somewhat semi-interested in orthodoxy may be more pushed to go and become reform. So you might sit there and say, by being more adamant about your positions, people may move to another side. That may be true, but I'm not concerned about that. There's an interesting statement by the Sridei H. Sridei H. Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg passed away in the 60s. He was the last Rosh Yeshiva of the Hildesheimer Yeshiva in Berlin. A very big Talmud Chacham. Sefer Sridei H. is a major work in halacha. Anyway, so the Sridei H. says something very interesting. He says the fact is that if you have these type of battles, it's true, you may have casualties. When you enter into the world of philosophy and questioning and analysis and intellectual investigation, you may have casualties. But that's the cost. That's the cost of developing ideas. So when people turn around and say, "Don't ask questions and don't rock the boat," the fact is, if you rock the boat, it may have consequences of certain people who say, "I don't like this," and leave. But the truth of the matter is that you won't have any progression of ideas. In a certain way, if you don't rock the boat, what I'm saying today is so much of assimilation today is because we don't stand for anything. It's so hazy. What do you stand for? I had a girl come up to me years ago as a teenager. Okay, what's wrong with going out with a non-Jew? What's the difference between a Jew and a non-Jew, anyways? Right. So he has his family event by an Easter dinner, and we have our family event by the Pesach Seder. But let's face it, all it is really just a family event. Okay, and you have a little bit more. So you do your spirituality with this system and that system. Like, for example, I mentioned you guys before, I'm sure, Unitarian Christianity, what do they call it? Liberal Judaism came up in England with this pamphlet in the 80s. What's the difference between liberal Judaism and Unitarian Christianity? Unitarian Christianity being the most left-wing form of Christianity. And the answer was nothing. No difference theologically between Unitarian Christianity and Reform Judaism. Right? What's the difference then? Is that Unitarian Christians are people who wish to achieve their spiritual goals using Christian motifs, and liberal Jews are people who wish to achieve these same goals using Jewish motifs. So they do A, we do B, but basically we're both trying to do the same thing. We're both having the same goals and with the same objectives. So the point is, if people say what's happening, the truth is a little bit of not haziness, pushing people to say something. Person comes up and says, "Listen, I have to follow this because I think Reform Judaism is correct." Good. Now I can fight with someone. I can have an argument with someone. I have ideas on the table. Why do you say that? And the truth is that my own personal belief, I guess this is my own bias, is that if you really get involved in this, I think Torah will come out on top. I'll tell you something interesting in my own life. Years ago, I was working as a program coordinator in a synagogue in Denver, Colorado. Okay, it was an interesting synagogue. It was a traditional synagogue. The Rav was a frum guy. He wanted to start a mechitza minyan. He wanted to start a mechitza minyan. And that's one of the reasons he brought me in. He thought I could be very helpful in trying to get a mechitza minyan going there, and that was his objective. Eventually, I found out that they actually did get a mechitza minyan in this shul, but it was one of these traditional shuls in Denver. And me, I was the program director. I didn't have any rabbinic title there. I was the program director, so I took care of the kids and stuff like that. But I didn't have any real rabbinic roles. But otherwise, for me, I did education and so forth, and I didn't really have any obligations rabbinically. So therefore, it was just me working in this traditional shul. But the fact is one of my dealings was to deal with the singles. So I had a singles organization, singles group within the shul, get people together and so forth and so forth. And there was a Reform temple in town, and they also had a singles group. So the assistant rabbi of the Reform temple wanted to do a joint program with us with the singles group. Okay, now the truth is, within certain definitions, I would do something like that. Okay, so the point is that, and those definitions are to highlight the theological distinctions. I won't participate in such things that deny the theological distinctions, but if you're clear about theological distinctions, understand the point of connection. Here we're Jews getting together as singles and so forth, but they wanted a discussion, the difference between Reform and Orthodox Judaism. That I'm willing to do. I'm willing to highlight the theological distinctions. I think it's really important to highlight the theological distinctions. Get people thinking. So he presented some aspects of Reform Judaism. I present some aspects of Orthodox Judaism to really try and get people going. It was a very successful program and so forth and so forth. It was very, very interesting what the people said. Okay, people told me that what was the buzz in the audience afterwards. Of course, most people liked the Reform Jewish perspective, right? This is okay, that's okay. And let's face it, from a liking perspective, people liked the Reform Jewish perspective. It wasn't as demanding. It wasn't as strict. Orthodox, especially with singles, Orthodox Judaism is a little bit it sets rules, right? So that was it. But what I heard the buzz is people said people liked what he had to say, but intellectually, they said you really came across, Orthodox Judaism came across as much more intellectually solid. There was something about this Reform Judaism that was wishy-washy. Okay, it came out too hazy. It came out too nice. Orthodoxy came out intellectually solid. Now, maybe that's bias from my perspective and so forth and all those other things. But the point is that I think that there is too much haziness in the world, and I think that the haziness pushes people to make decisions. And it's true that some of these people may move to the other side. But the point is I believe enough in Torah that if you get people thinking, there's enough in Torah will get people understanding the validity of the Torah perspective. So I don't really buy that the answer is to sort of hide away and afraid to challenge people. I think the answer is to challenge people, get people thinking. Anyway, so this all started with my statement about this new Canadian yeshiva and rabbinical seminary and so forth, and the very fact that that they're trying to create themselves as non-denominational, and I think that that's an inherent weakness in them. There's no such thing as non-denominational. You come to the table believing in something, and the idea is to point out what you believe in. That's extremely important. Some things that their disagreements are acceptable disagreements within the parameters of orthodoxy. Okay? There's other perceptions which are not. Now, I'm just going to tell you guys that if you're interested, okay, you can actually read an article of mine on the website. Okay, if you go to the library, and hopefully, okay, I'm going to go to the library right now. Okay, in introspection. Okay, there's an article that basically outlines my beliefs over here called Adjective and Non-Adjective Jews. Okay, so I just took everyone to that website there. Oh, what happened here? Something happened there. It went back. Okay, but that's basically it. Okay, so you guys see that? Adjective, non-adjective Jews. Okay, and it's on the website there, and you can get it through the library to introspection, get it there, or you can, search over here in the corner over there, adjective. Okay? Okay, and that's something that's a thing to read. Okay, so I'm going to give up the mic here for a sec. Babushka asks an interesting question. If possible, can you sometime in the future give us an article to read that will be for next week's session, so we can read it in advance? Okay, that's worthwhile. Okay, let me think. It's interesting. Why don't we try doing that? Trying to think of a good article. Just trying to think of a good article. See, there's so much stuff that's not on the website yet. Okay, here's a good article. You guys, here's something for you to think about. I'll give you guys a good article to think about. Okay? This is one of my... Where is it now? Okay. By the way, if you see it coming out, is there a distinctive Jewish ethical perspective? Here's a good article for you guys to think about. Okay? Here. The evil of Chesed. How's that one? You guys see that one? The evil of Chesed. You guys see it? You got it? The evil of Chesed. Okay? Why don't we look at that one next week? You guys want to look at that article? It's the way to find it. It's an update article. You can obviously search Chesed over here in the search function, but if you go to the library, you go to updates in 5757, you'll find the evil of Chesed. Okay, it's also another aspect of the library that you can get things through what do you call it? You can get things through. There's a topic search engine also here. If you go to the library, there's a search function, and I think one of the things here I'll show you. You see, there's a subject matter sorting. And I think one of the things is Chesed and Staka. So if you see this over here, you'll see that in the topic index there's Chesed and things. I just want to check, make sure this is going still. Okay, so there's actually a Chesed and Staka section, and over there you'll find the evil of Chesed. Okay, so you see here, I'll go there, and there it is over here, evil of Chesed, and we're back there. Okay, but I like that idea, Babushka. I think, okay. And by the way, I hope everyone, if you're coming, I hope you're all. I found out that our join link hasn't been working. We're trying to get that fixed. So I just found out that for a long time our join link hasn't been working. But so if people have tried to join our mailing list, had a little problems. But do join and get our emails and get stuff sent to you and stuff like that. So please sign up with that as well. But I think that's an interesting idea. Babushka's idea, I think, is a nice idea. Maybe we'll look at this concept next week, because I think it's a very important concept. The evil of chesed. How you have to put limits on chesed. Okay? Okay, I'm just going to give up the mic to see if anyone wants to say something. Okay, so everyone here, okay, I'm just taking everyone over to the Nishma blogs as well, because you can see Nishma blog, if the previous entry on the Nishma blog was increasing chasm among Jewish factions, and you can see, okay, issues of that nature over there in the Nishma blog. Okay, so that's just something over there also. Okay, okay, okay. So we'll see you guys next week. Okay, and you got the evil chesed article. Okay, okay, right? Alex, I hope you get your internet working. Okay, okay. Good night, everyone.